Part 17. And I'm actually quite pleased now because I think the end is in sight, or at least the end in as much as getting pretty close to having this functionality or the function of this database at least replicating what the spreadsheet did, and in fact exceeding quite a lot what the spreadsheet did, but becoming a usable thing, so I don't need to use that spreadsheet anymore. However, there are a few things left to do, and I need to sort of make a little bit of a recap of where we are with creating mixes. So let's create a mix. Let's take vanilla custard, let's open it up, let's click make a mix. Let's say that we want to make 500 ml, half a litre of this vanilla custard recipe. We click create, it goes away, it's done some work. Basically none of this is particularly interesting. It's telling us that the total weight of that mix, ignoring the bottle obviously, is 526.48 grams. And if we go down here, we can see that it has populated all of the ingredients, one row per ingredient, and I'm not going to go over all this again. But there is one important part of this missing, and that is where we select actually which bottle of the ingredient we're going to use. And these boxes here are set aside for that purpose. However, they're text boxes, and we are not going to be typing in which bottle of ingredient we're going to use, because that is exactly the problem with the spreadsheet. We have to go away and find which bottle has, in this case, 20.83 mil of it in, and yeah, that's a drag, because maybe it's you know, one bottle only has 10 in, and then we need to find another one with maybe another 10 in, and oh yeah, that's the headache that we are going to fix. So obviously we need to change these into something a bit more intelligent, and obviously that is going to be a drop down. So these will be replaced with drop downs that give us a list of possible ingredient bottles, limited obviously to the type that we're looking at. So when we click this drop down, it isn't there yet, we should see all of our options for 7.2% nic ingredients, and we just select the one that's that we want to use. Obviously we'll also need to see how much is in the bottle, so we can decide whether actually that's enough to fulfill the 20.83, and if it's not enough, then we'll use all of it, and we'll make up the rest hopefully with some other bottles that we have. And if we don't, well, then we know we can't make the mix until we order some new stock. So let's have a little look at how we might change these to drop downs. So let's close this a minute, and let's open the mix ingredient form by itself. So it's that embedded form, but we're opening it by itself. Let's give ourselves a little bit of room. Now the first thing that we're going to want to do is to obviously create a combo box. So let's just randomly create a combo box here. Let's cancel out of that, and let's rename this to, let's call it stock ingredient name, and as there's three of them, we'll index them and call it number 1. I won't bother with the other two for a minute, because actually what I'm about to do, I know from previous experience, doesn't really work. But anyway, I'm going to demonstrate the fact that it doesn't work, why it doesn't work, and the sneaky little fix that we'll do. So we currently have this drop down here. It's unbound, which we don't want. We want to bind it to the first stock bottle name in the database. So basically we'd be taking that control source and applying it to that one. Okay, good. So we currently have a drop down with nothing in it, which is going to be bound to the table field where we store our first stock bottle name. Now if we close this a sec, yeah, we'll save it, and if we open the actual mix form and go back to our huge old create button event handler, you'll see that somewhere down here and in here our subroutine is where all of that data gets filled out. So logically what we should do then is, when we filled out all the other fields, why not fill out the combo box? So let's actually close this a sec. Yes. So we've still got the code open in the background. Let's make a new mix. Let's do 50 mil. Create. Now, we know that all of this information here, we've got a big gap in between each one now, but anyway, we know that all this information here is being filled out basically by this bit of code here. This is where it actually gets inserted into the form. So it would kind of make logical sense that we also dealt with populating the values for this combo box there. So I'm going to go and do that, and I've put a little space in here for us to add it. I'm going to go ahead and do that and come back momentarily. Right, so I've done that. Basically what I've done is pretty much like all these other controls. We have targeted that stock ingredient name underscore 1 combo box, and we are saying basically that it's going to be a table or query as the source type, and in this case it's a query that we're going to write on the fly. And we're going to do that with a little bit of SQL, and there is where we stick in the SQL. So we're basically saying, for the values for this drop down, what we want is we want the stock ingredient name and with an underscore the stock order ID, so that we've got a combined unique reference to that particular bottle. And we'll take the quantity as well from stock, where the stock ingredient name equals this current mix name. Okay, so in the first time around, that mix name would have been the 7.2% Nick, and then it would be VG, and so on. So basically each time that it goes through building the rows in that subform, it should fill out the values for that drop down according to that particular mix ingredient name. So let's close this, and let's close that. Yes, let's make another mix. Let's do 50. And let's have a look at what's happened. So if we start at the top, we can see that we've got nicotine here, and our combo box contains Dolce de Leche. Why? That's not what we want. If we go down to the next one, and I really should have closed up that gap. If we go down to the next one, which is VG, we got Dolce de Leche. Now the clue here is that the last ingredient that we picked out is indeed Dolce de Leche, and that one happens to be correct, but yeah, for the rest it's not right. So basically the reason why this happens, and let's close this again because that gap really isn't making it very easy to view, so let's close up this cap as much as possible. So what's happening is this row, this form container area here, is being repeated for each ingredient. And unfortunately in Access, combo boxes, i.e. drop downs, their source, their row values, what's included in them, is not unique to each record. It's basically the same for each one, and as we're doing them in order of ingredient, what's happening is for each new ingredient it's just updating all of them. So the last ingredient being Dolce de Leche then updates each one before it to be Dolce de Leche as well. Yeah, so that doesn't really work. So what we're going to have to do is approach this from a slightly sneaky aspect. What we'll do is we shall leave them blank until such a time that we need to use them. So basically what will happen is it's bound to the database anyway, so if there is a value in there it's going to be showing regardless, and it will be correct. But then when we click on the box, we then want it to go ahead and fill out its values, or, you know, before it actually opens up, but between us clicking on it and it displaying its values to choose from, we want it to get those values. So that way we can force each time we click it for it to change to the particular values of what we want. So we'll do that inside this form on the got focus. So when we click on this or tab into it or whatever, it will then trigger an event which will update the values for this particular box, but actually it will update all of them. But that doesn't matter because we can't see or update all of them at the same time. We can only update one at a time. So that will work quite nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Right, so I've removed the little bit of code that was here inside our subroutine that's being filled out as the whole form's being created. And I've just put a note in to say that the stock name is populated in the got focus handler. So we'll close out of that and we'll go to the mix ingredient form. So basically inside the mix ingredient form, whenever this field gets focus, either by clicking on it or tabbing into it or whatever, it will run this bit of code, which is essentially exactly the same. It's just saying, yeah, we want the values to come from a query, and this is the query, and we take the parameter where the stock ingredient name is equal to the mix ingredient name that we populated already up there. That way around, every time we click into one of these boxes, it's going to repeat this bit of code and update it so that it should always be right. So let's close that and save everything. And close that. And let's try making a mix again. So let's create 300 ml this time. Create. And if we go down to the bottom, scroll up to the top, our first one is nicotine. And if we click on this, at the moment, don't forget that this is actually going to have nothing in it because we haven't clicked on anything yet. But as soon as we click on this or tab into it, it will run that query and it will update with exactly what we want, albeit that it's not wide enough, but we can get around to that in a sec. But what it's doing is it's going, okay, take that and get basically all of our stock bottles which are of that ingredient type and put them in here, and then we can select one. We can remove that in a minute. We don't need two bound fields for the same thing. If we then move down to, let's say, VG and click on that, it's going to repeat the same thing. So Bosch, there we go, it's now done it for multi. Now what will actually have happened in the background is actually all of the drop downs in here, all of the values in this drop down will also be the same as this. But that doesn't matter because we've already selected one and it's already updated the database. And seeing as we're not limited to what's in this list, we could in fact type anything in here. That's fine, that works. So we can select whichever VG we want, and we can go down to the PG and select the PG that we want. And we can go down and select, well, we've only probably got one vanilla custard and we've probably got one dulce de leche. And you can see that it's filling it into the database. So all we need to do now is to repeat that for another two options, and it's going to be exactly the same, but it's just going to do the same thing so that if we need to select more than one bottle, these are also drop downs. We'll replace the actual free text fields up here with these drop downs, and yeah, I'll get back to you once I've done that. Okie dokie then, so I have done that. As you can see, I've removed the plain old text fields and replaced them with, well, the combo that we'd already made. I've made other combos here and I've just renamed them accordingly. So that's number 2 and that's number 3. Each of these has a on-got focus handler, as you can see. And if we have a look at that handler, basically each one of them just calls a subroutine. Now basically I could have just repeated this code in each one of these, but well, this is the better way to do it, because if I need to change this code, I need to change it in one place. So each one does the same thing. The only difference being is it's passing over that part of its ID into this subroutine here so that it knows which one to update. The rest of it's the same. It's just when it's clicked or got focus, it will change the values accordingly. So let's have a quick look at that. Let's save this. Let's make a new mix. Let's do 100 ml, create. Let's go down to the bottom. We've got the big old gap again, but anyway. So we now have these 3 drop downs, and each one of them should represent our bottles of Nick. And there we go. There's one Nick.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Oh, we've got an error here. Okay, I need to have a look at that. Yeah, well, that's a pretty obvious one. Obviously, I copied and pasted it, but I didn't copy it all. I've missed off the C at the beginning. So that definitely won't work. Right. Let's try it again. Oh, dear, no. Let's close this. Yeah, let's save all that. Right, let's make a new mix. Let's try 300 this time. Create. Go down to the bottom. Go up to the nicotine, and hopefully each one of these will display the same thing. And we should be able to put in that one there, that one there, that one there, move down to the, let's move down to the VG, and there's all of our bottles of VG, 7, 12, and 14. Oh, all right, 13, that'll do. And yeah, so that's working quite nicely. So what do we need to do next? Well, I'll have a think about that and we'll do it tomorrow. Watching paint dry would be more interesting.